Hey, beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. I guess you can call it a podcast. And today I'm here to talk about Power Book 3, Raising Kanan. Normally, it will not be up this late on a Tuesday. However, I know y'all tired of me talking about my issues with my computer, but it was a real thing. So this time it's late. Going forward, it'll be on Monday, so it'll be on time. All right, let's talk about it. So the episode opens in 1985. We have Kangos, we have LL Cool J bumping radio, boom boxes. It's definitely 1985. They go into the playground and there's some kids beating up this one little chubby boy while holding back a girl. And she's yelling, "You don't have to do this." And the little chubby boy keeps getting up. He keeps getting hit, keeps getting up. And then eventually he gets hit and they tell him, "Next time, just give us your money." And he gets up and he just takes off running. And then we hear her say, she screams, "Get back here, Kanan." And then we hear 50 Cent, who is Kanan, doing the narration, saying that the hood don't have love for niggas that run. Because all the kids were laughing at him, basically getting beat up. So he runs all the way home, top speed, and he goes to a really nice house, actually. And he runs in, runs all the way upstairs. Mom calls for him, like, "Kanan, come here." He doesn't come, of course, and then she gets up and her boyfriend says, "Looks like he got into a scuffle at the park." So she goes up to see what's going on with him, and while she's going up there, we hear the narration saying that her boyfriend, High Post, is the one that got her started in the game, and he would eventually die within a year. Somebody's going to burn him up for telling, but he did always like him because he was good to his mom. So mom goes in the room and she says, "What's wrong, Kanan? What happened?" And he says the two guys beat him up and took his money. And she's like, "How'd they know you had money? I told you don't be showing your money." And he's like, "I didn't show them." And she's like, "Well, then you told somebody." And she's like, "And you gave it up?" He's like, "They overpowered me. They're bigger than me." So she says, "Where was Jukebox?" And he says they were holding her back. So mom proceeds to grab a white sock out of the drawer and start filling it with just hard stuff, hard cars and wheels and anything she could find. She got batteries and everything and put it in there, and then she ties it at the top and she tells him, "We're going back to that park." So they go back to the park. They arrive. She pulls up. Mom is fashionable. It is definitely 1985. She got that hairstyle that we all had, long in the back, feather in front. She had on her riding boots. She was styling on her way to the kids' park. She on her little leather jacket, and he was scared. But she's like, "You better go over there and do what you got to do, or either you gonna talk to them, deal with them, or you gonna have to deal with me." So Kanan walk up to the boys. They're like, "Oh, you're back for more?" He proceeds to beat them with a sock while everyone comes and runs around, and they're like, oh, look at him." And mom is standing there in her little fashions, smoking her cigarette, thoroughly impressed with her boy. And we hear the narration say that was the first time he heard his name ring out, and it ain't stopped ringing out since. Fast forward to 1991, Kanan's in high school, and we show up to see him and his mom in either the principal or dean's office, and she's gloating over him, saying how smart he is and how he's smart enough to get into this brand new $1 million school that they've built. And he doesn't want to go, of course, but he seems very unenthused until she says that the building has escalators. And he's like, "Escalators?" But she's saying that he didn't have time to really study for the test, but he's smart enough to go in and actually pass the test, so she signed him up for it. Mom is excited. He is not excited. So as soon as he and mom leave the office, there's a fight in the hallway. She turns and looks at him and says, "You're going to that school. You're taking that test." He's like, "I would have to take all these different buses and everything. Why do I want to do that?" And she's like, "Because there's a different, better world for you out there." And it's at this time that we learn that mom is into constellations and the stars and astrology and all of that. So mom gets a beep and she has to go. Then we see Kanan going into a classroom with this young girl singing, and it happens to be Jukebox. And he says, "You hear that? That's my cousin Jukebox. She can sing." And he's like, "But don't let that voice fool you, because she's the hardest nigga you ever did come across." And he said that he's never loved anybody as hard as her either. He said, "Jukebox is everything." I loved it. So Kanan's standing in line at the cafeteria, and we see this cute little girl call his name Kanan, and he turns around and looks totally shocked, like he hasn't seen her in years. And I'm like, you guys are in high school, so you saw her yesterday more than likely. He's like, hey, Davina. And then we hear the narration saying that Davina Harris is the dopest young lady on the South Side, and she's mainly dope because she doesn't even know it. So Davina says, I saw your mom here at school earlier. She's so pretty. And she says, and you got them same jeans. And he said, well, I don't know. My dad may have been ugly as hell. And she's like, nope, because from what I heard, he was running things and they don't let ugly people do that. So I think it's cute that she's like giving him compliments without giving him compliments. So sitting in the cafeteria, we are introduced to Famous. Real name Sean. He got the name Famous because in third grade, he was chosen to read a poem he had written on the radio. And he said that shit was garbage, but still. So Kanan then looks over at Davina, and she's with her boyfriend, Buck 20. He says every school has a Davina, and every Davina has a Buck 20, who's the smoothest, most well-dressed dude at school. So Jukebox comes over, and she's like, listen, when are you going to get over it? And how long have you had a crush on her? And he's like, since the second grade. She says, well, how long has she been playing you? And he says, since the first grade. And she's like, you need to get over it. He's like, I'm never going to get over it. So now we're at the hospital, and we see Mom walking down the hall with a guy. It's Uncle Lulu, her youngest brother, and her right-hand man. And Kanan says that if there's shit to get done, he's going to get it done and get it done right. So we hear Lulu saying something. Can't make it out. Sounds like gibberish. And Kanan says, oh, they're talking in code. That's why you can't make it out. It's top secret. So mind your own damn business. So they make it to the room, and one of their guys got shot. Basically, they said they just ran up on him and blazed. Everybody else got away, but he got shot. So we see this guy coming in, and he's eating, and she's like, Marvin, what the fuck happened? Marvin said, listen, they got him in the meat while he's eating his chips or whatever. She says, so where you been? He says, listen, nigga hungry. So then we hear Kanan saying, that's my Uncle Marvin. He's my mom's oldest brother, and this nigga never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. But he's loyal and tough. So Marvin tells her that Neek is moving in. He's trying to move in the corners, and they need to do something about it. She's like, nah, don't do anything. He's like, no, we need to move. She's like, listen, we're barely getting out of this drought. We can't go to war. He tells her that they're getting squeezed out of lanes too, and I'm guessing that's the club we'll learn about later. And she's like, since when? Since now. And she's like, damn it, now I gotta go deal with this. And she tells the guy that's in the hospital bed, listen, I got your hospital bill. So after school, the kids go to an arcade/pizza place, and Kanan wants next. So he goes over to the change machine, which happens to be by the window. He looks up and he sees a car pull up. He says that's Unique. He's the biggest dope dealer on the South Side. And he's like, everybody, all the guys want to be him or either be down with him. And they say his friend comes and stands next to him, and you see him talking to Davina's boyfriend. And Kanan says to his friend, yeah, I didn't know that Neek put Buck is his name. I didn't know Neek put Buck on. And he's like, yeah. And they look at the car, and his friend says, yeah, it's bulletproof. So Lou and Rock pull up to a club. They go in, ask for Hugo. The guy says Hugo's not here. Just then, a white lady holding a noisy Pomeranian comes out, and she's like, Hugo took a mental health day. Who's looking for him? And Lou says, me and my sister has business with Hugo. And she says, his business is my business. I'm the club's new publicist. Rock says, this isn't about publicity. She says, everything is about publicity. And she says, oh, I know who you are. You're that drug dealer that made a deal with Hugo to sell blow out of here. Yeah, we're not using it anymore. It's stepped on and ghetto. We're going to use some of my people now. And Rock said, I bet you ain't. And then Lou says, let me talk to her. And Rock says, yeah, because this bitch don't know who she's dealing with. And the white girl says, who you calling a bitch? She says, you, bitch. And walks away. She goes over to the bar where there is this super fine guy, the bartender. So the bartender says, she's the worst. Rock says she's about to get her ass beat. He says, no tears would be shed. And he says his name is Symphony. She says, that's a hell of a name. He says, I'm a hell of a guy. And he is. He is very good looking. So basically, a little flirting going on. Lou comes back, says, we're going to get at Hugo later. They leave the club. So now they're at Lamont's diner. And Kanan says, narration of course, that this is their spot. They eat dinner there as a family every Wednesday since he can remember. And I'm thinking, how smart is that if they're these big drug dealers and she's like really high on the totem pole? Why would you have one set spot that you guys frequent so that everybody would know where to find you and when? So there's a having dinner, and Rock is telling the brothers about the school that Kanan gets to get into. And Marvin is Juke's father, the oldest brother. And he looks at Jukes and says, why didn't they come to you and ask you about it? She said they did, but you said it's a waste of time. And he said, yeah, that sounds like something I would say. So do it now. And she's like, I'm too old. He's like, well, yeah, you know what? Science and math, that's good enough for us, good enough for you. And Rock says, yeah, but it wasn't good enough for us. So in comes Famous with his sister Jessica, and Lou looks really smitten. He says that, well, she says that she was living with her father and now she's there to work and go to school. And Rock asks Famous if he wants to sit down and have dinner on her. He's like, nah, I don't want to impose. And Kanan says, dude, this is where we have been having dinner for years every Wednesday and you just so happen to show up. Yeah, just sit down. So they sit down and the sister ends up sitting next to Lou. After dinner, they're standing outside and pretty much just talking. Everybody's talking. Lou is talking to Jessica, and Melvin's talking to Rock, and all the kids are talking. So Famous calls Kanan over, and he says, listen, I don't want my sister messing around with your uncle. And him and Jukebox says, you've been trying to get in this family since you were 4, so maybe this is your way in. Then we see a car roll up with a gun hanging out the window. Hanging out the window, and Melvin yells out, get down. So everybody gets down. Lou protects Jessica. When they come back up, she's like, oh my God, nobody's ever saved me before. Lord. So if I hadn't mentioned it already, Lou is attractive. He's handsome. And now Jessica is smitten as well. So as everybody's getting up, the car is driving off. The car that did all the firing is driving off. And Kanan looks inside the car, and in the back seat, he sees Davina's boyfriend. So back at home, Rock brings Kanan some water to his room and asks if he's okay. He said he's fine. He's like, I know who shot at us. She says, you don't know what you think you know. He says, I know more than you think. And she said, I'm handling it. He says that secret language you and Uncle Lou be talking is wisdom, cipher, and understanding. He said, I heard some 5%ers using it, supreme mathematics. Mom, I know more than you think I know. She says, you just deal with what you have to deal with and let me deal with what I have to deal with. You stay out of it, deal with the test, and I'll do my job. He says, but what if something happens to you? What if they would have hit you tonight? She's like, they weren't trying to hit me. They were just trying to send a message. He says, well, what if they did? Then what happens to me? She says, you think I got grandma that house for nothing? You always have somewhere to go. So he cries and tells her, I don't want you to die. She kisses him on the forehead and tells him to go to bed. So the next morning, the kids are walking to school, and Jukebox asked Kanan what Rock said. She said she's going to take care of it. Famous said he was scared. He saw his whole life flash before him. They start talking about the fact that Kanan has the test the next day, and Famous says, if I was you, I'd fuck up that test on purpose. I ain't trying to go to school with them crackers. And then we see Kanan just kind of looking off into space, taking it all in. Now we see Rock and Unique having a little talk in the park. She says, you guys came at us last night. He says, nah, they weren't really trying to hit you. They was just trying to, get this little talk going, pretty much, to parlay what's happening here. She says, your brother would have never done nothing like that. He said, well, Ronnie is upstate for the rest of his life, so we doing things my way. She says, your guys also came at my guys. He said, yeah, some of my guys went a little wild, and they've been checked. He says, High Post and I had an agreement about these blocks. So Rock tells him, Post deals, they not my deals. She pretty much does what she want to do. And he says, yeah, you must really miss Post because y'all was all in love and stuff. She says, well, he used to tell me, once you get on your knees, you'll never get off your knees. She said, I refuse to get on my knees for you or any other man. She says, you guys can take 140 to 143, and then they take the rest. So they shake on it and they have an agreement. So now we're at the white lady from the club's house. Sorry, they did not give her a name to my knowledge or recollection, but she keeps stopping and saying, what's that smell? What's that smell? And I'm like, girl, if it's that bad, that's you. That's you, sis. Something wrong. So she gets up and she's like, Bella, did you go poopy? So she walks to the kitchen and you can hear the microwave going. And she opens the microwave and Bella is dead in the microwave being cooked up, courtesy of Rock. So next time, watch your mouth. And of course, she just screams to high heaven. She screams like crazy. The next morning, Rock is dropping Kanan off at the school where he's taking the test. She gives him a kiss on the forehead, gives him a lunch, and tells him he's going to knock it out the park. So Kanan's there taking the test, looking around like he's nervous, don't know what to do. Everybody else is, concentrating hard. And then we hear the narration say niggas are defined by the choices that they make. And my choice has always been clear. He says his mom over everything. And we see him start to put B's, he has a Scantron, so he's just putting B for everything. And he says he would choose his mom over a bunch of white niggas any day. I'm like, he loves the N-word. Jesus, 50. So of course, Kanan is the first one done. He takes his paper up to the desk and walks out. We see Rock pulling up at the house and one of the henchmen pull in behind her, and he gets out and hands her the dog's little chain that says Bella, and he says medium well. She says no doubt. So Kanan walks into the pizzeria and there's his friends sitting at a table and they like, dang, that went fast. He's like, yeah, I knew the answers before I sat down. So apparently there's a friend named D-Wiz, and the narration says that D-Wiz is always with it, whatever, whenever. And D-Wiz says, yeah, I saw bucking them on your mom's block, 140th. And then Famous is like, oh, so they taking shots at us and now they taking blocks? And Kanan's like, nah, we gonna take care of it. So D-Wiz says, yeah, my brother got some heat over at the house. And Kanan says, cool, let's go, we gonna take care of it. Okay, so in a very random scene, we see Jukebox go to an all-girls school with a bunch of white girls. She walks up, they're looking at her like, what? Apparently she knows one of the white girls from choir, I think. They go on the roof, they're talking, the white girl tries to kiss her. She's like, yo, what are you doing? And I guess she's not openly gay just yet. But we do know from her being on Power that she is. So then we see Marvin and Rock walking down the street. Of course, Marvin is eating because they said he loves to eat. And he tells her that we're back up at Hugo's. Spoke to Hugo's and everything is good over at Laney's. He says, and he was talking some shit about some white girl over at the club and her dog in a microwave. And then Rock says, what white girl? And Marvin starts laughing like, oh, okay, I got it. That was you. So Kanan and D-Wiz and the guys show up on 40th and see Buck and them over there selling. So he walks around the block and he's like, yeah, he's posted up on my mom's block. It's so disrespectful. And then he says, get the strap, which made me laugh because as we all know, well, whoever follows 50 on Instagram, after every post, he used to put hashtag get the strap. I don't know if he still does, but he definitely used to. So the guy Famous says, yeah, if I don't have a gun, I'm not going out there naked. He's like, if they start shooting back at us, what am I supposed to do? Yell at them? So they tell the other ones to stay there, and it's just going to be Kanan and D-Wiz going around, I guess, doing the shooting. So Kanan and D-Wiz go around there, and when they walk up, the guys are like, the fuck you want, Kanan? So they pull out their guns and the guys start running like, oh shit. So two of them got away. One of them got shot. And when he fell, the guys, Kanan and D-Wiz are like, who shot him, me or you? And I'm like, Jesus. So D-Wiz says, he's trying to speak. Kanan goes and leans down over him. He pulls his hoodie into him and doesn't say anything, but got blood all over him. And I'm like, why would you go and stand over him? Like, that was just ridiculous. Then of course they had to run off. So we hear the narration say that Buck 20 was the first nigga that he ever shot and killed, and it stays with you. So yeah, he pretty much got rid of Davina's boyfriend. So we're at a fancy restaurant, and Rock and Symphony are on a date. Symphony, I forgot to mention earlier, is going back to school for his master's in urban planning, I think he said. And she is flirty. She is really feeling him because she is doing all kind of smiling. He's talking to her about what it is he does and why it is that he does it. She tells him, I am in a different kind of line of work. And he says, if it ain't no problem with you, it ain't no problem with me. And they're just talking and flirting. All of a sudden, we see Lou come in. He bends over and whispers in Rock's ear, Kanan. And that's all he had to say. She got up immediately and said, I'm sorry, I gotta go. And she put money on the table and said, this is for the food, for the dinner. And he's like, I asked you out. But it's clear that she's used to paying for everything and kind of being the dominant one. So it's going to be interesting to see how this love story develops. So back at the house, we got a family meeting, and Mom's going off on Kanan, and she's like, nigga, what the fuck did you do? I told you I would take care of it, and I did. He's like, nah, Ma, he was on your corner 140th. She's like, I gave him those corners. And he's like, why would you do that? Then Marvin says, yeah, I'd like to know that too. Lou says, here we go. She says, listen, Marvin, you not running things because you've already shown that you are not able to stand in these shoes. So why don't you shut the fuck up and let me talk to my son? And he does. I'm like, dang, Rock, you ain't have to talk to him like that with his daughter sitting right there. So she asks him, whose blood is that on your sweatshirt? And he goes, not mine, it's the other kids. She's like, yeah, the dead kids. She's like, so just so we're clear, you and your friends went out and killed this boy for some blocks that I already gave them. And Marvin turns to Jukebox and he asks, and where the fuck was you when all of this was going down? She says choir practice and looks at Kanan. Kanan looks like he knows where she was. So Kanan stands up and says, Ma, I want to help you. She's like, you want to help me? He says, yeah. She says, well, then go to that school and get out of here. And he's like, you could have been sent me to grandma's house if you wanted me to be safe. He's like, but you kept me here with you, next to you. So this is all I know. This is all I have. And this is pretty much what I want to do. And he says he doesn't want to leave her. He doesn't want to leave his mom. So he wants to get into business. So he says, which one is it, Ma? Am I staying here or am I going? You need to make up your mind. She tells him to go to his room. He says, nah, I'm grown. I don't think you can tell me that no more. And then they show Lou and he just rolls his eyes like, oh, Jesus. And I'm like, if you were really grown, you wouldn't say, I don't think you can tell me that anymore. So she's like, he says something about helping her fly the flag and having her back. And that's what he's trying to do. And she says, you don't tell me what you're going to do. I'm the mom. I tell you what you're going to do. So Lou says he got to get rid of that sweatshirt. And then Marvin says he got to burn it. And she tells him, go take it off. So Lou goes and stands next to her and tells her, they're going to hit us back. And she just puts her finger in her mouth like she's super worried. So a while later, Rock is sitting at the table smoking a cigarette. Kanan comes down and he's like, hey, Ma. And she's like, nowhere near that time yet. Because basically, she's just not ready to talk to him yet. She's not ready to look at him, talk to him, anything. So she tells him, go take out the garbage and then get back up to your room. And to me, that was her way of being like, no, you're not grown. You're going to do what I say do. She tells him she's going to take him to his grandmother's. And she says, maybe you were right. I should have just sent you out there from the rip. And he proceeds to take the garbage out. So Kanan's taking out the garbage, and there's this car that drives up, and they call him by name before they start shooting. Yo, Kanan. They start shooting. He drops to the ground. Mom gets her gun, comes out shooting. She gets him up off the ground. He lets her know that he's not hit. And the next scene, we have police everywhere. The car that was in front of their house is riddled with bullets. And then there's another car that pulls up, and by the look on her face and Kanan's face, it looks like they know this particular police guy that is pulling up. Then we see Omar Epps and a white girl getting out the car, and we hear the narration saying, every hood got a police cop that think he owns the place, like he's the biggest gangster around, but it ain't that simple. So Mr. Malcolm walks up and says, looks like baby boy's balls dropped. And he says the hood says that your boy and his friend got prices on their head. And she's like, the hood's got it wrong. Just a fucked up mistake. Somebody hit the wrong house. He says, that's your story? And she's like, yeah, that's the one. So he asked Kanan, is that the same shit you about to say? And she says, my son ain't got nothing to say to you. And he's like, watch your back, Raquel. And then he looks at Kanan and says, and keep your eyes open, B. And I'm like, okay, so he's going to be a jerk, but not so much so, because at least he told him to keep his eyes open. So he does want him to live. So the rest of the family walks up, and we have a little moment with Jukebox and Kanan where she says, it's scary, right? And he's like, yeah, shit's so scary, I ain't even have time to be scared. And she's like, I'm glad they missed. And he's like, I'm glad too. So Kanan asked Jukebox, so where were you earlier? And she didn't say nothing. She just kind of smiled. He said, white girl, huh? And she just gave a little smile. So then we go over to Rock and the brothers. And Lou says, listen, I never tell you how to raise your son, Rock. But they coming after Kanan. And ain't no escalators and no white school gonna save him. And Marvin says his mama ain't either. Now we back in the park the next day with Rock and Unique. And she's handing him a wad of money for Buck's family. He says, we had a truce, Rock. And your boy and his friends violated that. You think a wad of cash is going to satisfy his family? She says, speaking of violations, you came to my house and went after my son last night. And he walks up in her face and says, and we going to continue to. I got money on all them niggas' heads until me and you come to some kind of understanding. So he tells her, I want all the corners. They all mine. No splits, no nothing. They are all mine. He says, because if I don't come back then with something, then my crew gonna be looking at me and asking questions that people in our position don't want to answer. And she says, Kanan is not to be touched. He's like, I dead the bounty, but Buck got a lot of people on the south side. I can't do anything if some random come up and try to get some get back for what was done. And she says, Kanan's not in this. And he's like, Kanan been in this since before he was born. He's your kid, and whoever Kanan's dad is, I guess he was a big guy around the way. So he's like, yeah, he's been in this before he was in this. So he tells her, that's why I always say this game ain't for broads. Distractions make you weak, make you blink. And she says, you don't love your kid any less than I love my son. And he says, listen, I didn't carry my son. I love him to death, but you carried him. That's a bond like no other. He says, it's chemistry. She says, biology. He said, even worse. And then he says, listen, all the blocks are mine, period. And she says, I'm not blinking, Neek. My eyes are wide open. So next scene, we see Rock going and waking up Kanan. Tell him to get dressed. Let's go. So they get in the car. They're driving. Seems like it's far out. They stop at a vacant lot. And they're just standing there looking at the sky. And he says, I thought you was taking me to grandma's. She said, how'd the test go? And don't lie. He said, well, I guess it could have went okay if, there's a whole lot of answers that are B's. And she's like, oh, okay, so you do the test. So she's very disappointed. She closed her eyes and just kind of shake her head. And she says, Kanan went hard on them B's. And then she looks up at the sky and she points to some stars in the constellation. And she says, you see that right there? That's Orion. And she says, Orion's a hunter. And she said, that's us, Kanan. Hunters, never the hunted. And she reaches in her front and takes out a gun and gives it to him. And then she tells him to shoot. And he's about to just aim all regular. She's like, no, with both hands. Strongest hand on top. And he shoots. And she says, okay, that bullet is out there now, going around the world, and you will be forever chasing that bullet. And she's like, so you're in it now. And she looks extremely disappointed because even though he's in it and she's helping him come in, this is not at all what she wanted. And they leave off just shooting. She's shooting, he's shooting. She's looking at him like, dang. So that's the end of the episode. And I will see you guys next week for episode 2, which hopefully will go way more smoothly because we will be totally introduced to these characters and not having to really explain the dynamic and how they act and what they do. If you are still here at this point, you are the real MVP. So please like, comment, and subscribe if you have not. And I will see you guys later on today, or tomorrow actually, for Doubling Down with the Doricos. And I'll see you next week for episode 2. Smooches!